All right, so in this video, we're going to be looking at the checking out dependencies functionality of the tool. And what you can use this shelf tool for, just this button right here, is essentially add untracked files that are being used in a HIP file to your Perforce. So let's say that you have this cool looking grid and you have some animation on there, and these frames have been cached out as BGOs on disk. You submit this file to Perforce and someone else downloads it, and they're like, hey, cool stuff, but the cache is not there, it's missing. Well, then you'll be thinking, why is the cache not submitted? Well, by default, these files are not being tracked by Perforce, but if we go into Perforce and we check out the workspace, we'll see here that these files that we generated, they do live on disk, but Perforce, knows nothing about them, or at least the online depot knows nothing about them because you've not added them. So what you could do is you could, look where is this, and go here in Perforce and mark all these files for add. But that could be quite a hassle if you have a large complex network where you have tons of nodes writing to disk, loading from disk, doing lots of other stuff. And so that's what this checklist, this checkout dependencies shelf button comes in for. So what you do is you just simply hit the button here, and it's going to scan your HIP file for files that are being written to disk that either need to be checked out or that need to be added, right? So in this case, we're going to create a new change list. We're going to say adding BGO cache, and we're going to hit add, and that's going to add all of those to Perforce for us. Okay, so now when we go into Perforce and we hit refresh, we'll now see that all of these files that were being used are actually there and being tracked, which is super nice and convenient, right? Now, what else can you use this for? So let's say that you use the workflow of using file nodes like this, right? And instead of setting it to read file, you set it to be writing, right? So you, for example, say hip slash cache slash grid.bgo.sc, like that, and then you set it to be write. Now, this is convenient because now what you can do is have this HIP file or this file swap automatically write this file to disk as soon as this node cooks. But that can be problematic because now let's say this file has been added to Perforce, right? And you now cook this HIP file, you will run into permission errors because this node will be trying to write to this file, which is write protected by Perforce. And so when you click this button here now, this of course is going to find that grid.bgo, and you can add that to your change list, which means that now when you cook it, it will no longer get any permission errors. Okay, so how does the plugin know what needs to be tracked and what are these files and what does it need to care about? Well, if you go into the install location of the plugin, you'll find this file here called P4Nodecheckouts.json. And when you open it, you'll find here a dictionary called nodes, which describes the internal node names of various nodes that exist in Houdini. And so the one that we just use is, for example, the ROP geometry, right? We can see what that name is by middle clicking on this node, and we'll see ROP geometry. So that is indeed this file here. So now what does this dictionary tell us? Well, inside of the ROP geometry key, we'll see that there's an element called SOP output equals true. Now, the SOP output is the name of the parameter that the plugin needs to look at. In this case, it's this one here. And the Boolean we have after it means that it always needs to check out that file if it is present, or always consider it to be present. Now, the reason this is here is because the plugin also supports conditionals for checking out a file or not. Because let's say you're using a file swap, and all you're doing in a file swap is simply loading some FBX from disk, you of course don't need to check that out. And so what you can do with that conditional is tell it that take a look at the file mode parameter, right, which is this one here, file mode. And if it is set to mode number 2, then we want to consider it for checkout. Otherwise, we want to ignore it. And so what that allowed us to do is, for example, tell it to only check out files if the file mode parameter is set to write files, right? So 0, 1, 2. Only then do we want to consider a file for checkout. So in the case where we have this BGO here and we click this button, we'll see that it will not find any untracked dependencies because this is not set to parameter number 2. And that's it. That's the checking out dependencies shelf button. So of course, this JSON that I showed you is extendable. So if you want to add your own nodes, you can simply extend it and add them in here. And the plugin will now also support your custom nodes that you have created in your pipeline.